Go anywhere. Welcome to another Win by Noon Monday Mastermind. I am the founder of Win by Noon, Todd Bookspan, and I'm so excited you're here. Almost as excited as I am to have my co-host, the founder and CEO of Plug and Play SM, Deborah Bird. Welcome, Deborah.
And I feel like we're Twinkies today. This was not planned, but we're both wearing the anniversary shirt. Look at that.
You know, I think it's pretty good. It's funny because we're getting ready to pull it off the shelves, the anniversary, 5-year anniversary, but I haven't pulled it off yet, transparently, because my daughter wants one and I want to order a couple more for myself because it's my favorite shirt now.
I get lots of compliments on this.
One. Me too. So, so as always, we're excited to have you all here. Our goal today is really to wow you in 30 minutes with some actionable advice. And I really thought that our conversation last week around what you learned at the Forward conference was great. So I would encourage you all to go over to our YouTube channel, or maybe you're there watching this recording now, and watch that, because Deborah, I think you crushed it and added a ton of value. Anything that you want to say about that real quick before we jump into today's topic?
No, just encourage people, especially as we go into the fall and winter. It's such a great time to go to events, even if it's outside of the typical mortgage conferences. It's nice to rub elbows and hear other perspectives from other industries who are creating disruption. So don't forget to look outside of our just norm of mortgage and real estate.
I think that's great advice, and we briefly talked about it last week. But I would really think about it is that I found that the times where I get stagnant in my career and my thinking was when I was just really one-dimensional. Now, if you're newer, I think you need to be one-dimensional. I think when you're brand new, you need to be pouring in to learning everything you can about your industry and your craft. But what I found is that even when I was in it for 10 years, I was kind of, had this blinders on, and I was just so focused on learning more about mortgage, and I was just going deeper down the rabbit hole, which was great, but it wasn't necessary. I feel like I missed opportunity because I wasn't kind of putting my head up to see what other people were doing. So I think that was a great suggestion.
Yeah, and just this week there's the Core Mastermind in Dallas. What? So that's coming on Friday here, and then you also have the Tom Ferry Summit, which is coming up this month. And so that's why I bring it up. Is they say it wasn't Apple who had nothing to do with the music recording industry, then disrupts with their Apple Music Play, and then you have Amazon and you have Uber and Netflix. And so even though they had nothing to do with, like, Netflix had nothing to do previously with Universal Studios, and so sometimes they can help just kind of trigger that thought or an idea that could really change your business, but it may mean associating outside of the normal box.
I love it. And I have to give a quick tip to your Cowboys, because they were just picked as the most valuable sports team, $7.64 billion. Good for them.
Well, and it's America's brand. I mean, that's America's team. So
no, it's actually not. You can call yourself all you want that, but that's not what the rest of us who are here from, outside of the great state of Texas, believe. And so that's cool. I love that. I did enjoy the game that I went there. In fact, I just need to hit up my friend and see if I can get one of his 10 tickets for a game this year. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the fact that it's August. And so what my thinking always is, and you kind of joked about it before we got on here, is that people just don't spend any time reviewing. And most of you know that I still have a team that I oversee the sales side of, coach them. And so that's what I spent my morning doing, was really digging in on the year-to-date numbers. And normally I would do that at mid-year, right? I would have done it at the end of June. But as you all know, I've been kind of quasi vacationing in California. One more week I'm excited to be here for. And so because of that, I hadn't really spent the time on that deep dive. And so I thought I'd kind of walk you all through, well, why should you review? What should you review? And then really, how do you take action, from what you've learned on that? And I think it applies to all parts of your life. And so, and maybe Deborah, you can talk about a social media review, but then I can't make fun of me. Don't review mine. Review someone who's good at social media. All the more reason. I just.
You just wait till you see your content this month. You have a lot of reels and YouTube shorts scheduled. So
all right,
we slice and dice content of things that you said.
you guys are going to make me look good. And I wrote a quote down. I was trying to find it from our interview with Don Hobbs that we did on Friday, but I think it was pretty much that, if you're not doing it, you're pretty much making a choice not to do it, which really hurt because I really do want to do it, but I've obviously made a choice not to be good at social media. So we could talk about that in a sec, but let's just sort of talk about numbers. And so I think when you look at it, you got to look at it from a numbers perspective, and there's other places to look at it. Like I did do a mid-year personal financial review, and there's a guy on the real estate side. Some of you might know him. His name is Brett Tanner. And if you're in the Keller Williams world, you certainly know who he is. He just launched with Gary Keller, KW Wealth, and I've been in Brett's private mastermind since earlier this year. And he has his clients who pay him to for coaching and who are in this mastermind. You're supposed to do it every month. Now that's just transparently way too much work for me to go in there and add up but it was pretty in depth. I took, estimated value of my rental properties. I went in, I'd look at my mortgage balances on them so I could see what the equity was, what's in every asset account I have, what are those debts? And I typically used to do it quarterly, but I didn't ever go as deep as I'm going now. And so that's sort of been my commitment with that group. But so number one is, what parts of your lives do you want to be looking at and take score, right? I mean, in the end, it's, you kind of need to know that. Like for me, guess what? My properties I own went up, and the stuff that I have that was in the stock market, guess what? It went down. And so, these are things you have to be aware of, right? You should be taking score. And then the other parts is really from a business perspective, right? What are the metrics that you're going to follow? And certainly as being Mr. Win by Noon, I believe you've got to look at both sides of the balance sheet, so to speak, right? You got to look at the activities and you have to look at the results. But in the end, the results is what you get paid on. And so at a minimum, you've got to be looking at that. So even if you're not going to be super committed to the activity side, then, you certainly have to look at the result side and see how you're doing. And again, same thing. A lot of you are down this year. And so then the question is as well, how do I get that trajectory reversed? Hopefully the market will maybe do some self-correcting, but certainly you've got 8 hours in a day, 6 hours a day, whatever that number is. I had to pause there to think about how many hours I think you're all working. Some of you are working a lot more than that. And so it's looking at the activities that'll get you there. But so for me, just from a brass tacks perspective, I pulled all of the closings from the team. And, again, the metrics that we're looking at is, what the loan it was. We're looking at things like price exceptions. Were there any price exceptions on loans? So loan amount, we're looking at loan type, really just trying to get information on it. Where did the loan come from? Was it from the database? Was it from a past client? Was it from, HomeBot? Was it from a real estate partner? How did that get there? And then we're comparing it, right? Got to look back and compare it to last year. And now some people say, but last year was so good, and last year was great, right? But and some people want to say, well, because last year was so good, it's okay to be down this year. And it's the first year where I've said to people, you know what, you ran so hard for the last 2 years that if you were going to actually set your goal lower, that it didn't offend me. I've said it a couple of times, right? Our team did 160 million last year, and so we set a goal of 120 million. So we said, hey, could be a lower, by 20% almost this year, with a stretch goal of 150, which is, we're kind of on track somewhere in the middle there right now. But normally that's never the case. Normally it's always foot on the gas and try to hit a bigger number. And so then once I look at the total closings, then I'll be digging in on applications. We'll be digging on number of leads. We'll be looking at conversion rates, right? Because it's one thing to say that the market is down, but then the question is, how are your conversion rates? Because your conversion rates shouldn't necessarily be down. Your conversion rates may be down because you may say it's harder for a client to get a house under contract, which was true for the first half of the year, but that's certainly changed now. Conversion rate could be down because some people got cold feet, right? They decided not to, sell their home and buy a new one, or maybe they decided that they were going to, re-sign a lease and wait until next year, whatever that looks like. But you really should be digging deep on your conversion rates, because ultimately in the end, if you're going to have a smaller pool, then you need to convert that pool at a higher rate. And then you just be looking at it and saying, okay, well, why, I would get really granular. Okay, look at the Smith family. Okay, the Smith family didn't convert. Why? Okay, put it on hold because they couldn't find a house. The Jones family, they didn't buy. Why? Or they didn't buy because they felt that interest rates were too high and they were going to wait for interest rates to come down. And so really look at what those are. This one didn't convert. Why? Oh, they went to a different real estate agent or to a different lender, and be looking at that. And when you track those types of things, then you can see trend year over year month over month, and then you can double down on it, because really in the end it always comes down to activity. As you're watching conversion rates, if the conversion rates are increasing, then you can look like more of a rock star even with less activity. But it's always the goal is knowing what's the activity that's required today to reach my goal at the end of the year. So we've got 5 months now, so I'll be looking back at all of those numbers. Then I look at the activity side of it if you choose to, and certainly from the activity side, I'm going to look really at what I'd be looking at is the outbound activity, right? How many calls am I making? And I would be looking at the connections I'm making, quality conversations and live meetings, and then seeing how many of those did I have versus the closings that I had. And then if you've been doing it for a while now, then you're going to compare that to last year. Okay, well, guess what? I had, I talked to 80 people a week last year. I'm only talking to 60 people a week this year. And so then the question is that how do I go from the 60 back up to the 80? Because ultimately some people say, well, it's just the market, it's just going to be quiet. But we all know that you have opportunities to create activity. And so ultimately that's where I start. I start looking at the numbers and just really dissecting it. And I'm willing to take a deep dive. I don't go super deep every single month, like what I'm doing on the close stuff. Like we'll look at it month over month and see how it is. But ultimately, you're going to have to decide what's that look like for me, and am I going to take the time? And then I say, if you're going to take the time, are you going to actually learn from it? And so that's why I got to decide, well, how deep am I going to go? So to me, it's what's the data of the results? What's the data of activity if I have it? If I don't have the data of the activity, well, at least what's my conversion rate data? How does that compare to the previous period? And then lastly, then it's okay, well, what are the actions I'm going to take going forward? And we could talk about how you can create those additional actions, because it's not that hard. It's just a choice. It's a choice to make that commitment to go after it. So that was a whole lot. I was just on a roll there, and about 3/4 of the way through, I'm like, man, I've not let Deborah talk in 7 minutes. I better shut up.
I'm taking lots of notes.
I see
What I
that.
love, yeah, what I love that you said was, because what's so true is when you don't take time to stop and look, what I have found and what some of my clients have even self-discovered is they would make these stories up in their head and they thought they were working 8 hours a day, or they were just, expanding their workload to make it feel like, if they got to the office at 9 and they wanted to make sure they didn't leave until 5 or 6, they weren't really being productive or effective. So really tracking your time and knowing, how much time are you spending? How much of it is actually focused, and is it planned, and is it intentional? And then two, just like you said, if you're not tracking your activities, or even if you are, when you're measuring them, and you said this earlier in the year, how else do you know what to double down on based off what's working? And so I actually had a strategy call just before this one, and I had a client who was deciding to just take away the refi numbers from last year and thought that would be maybe a better comparison, even though it was harder for people to get their offers accepted. But they thought, because of those refi numbers, that is not always the norm of having that volume. They're just going to look at the years past. And I don't know what that could look like, for you, if you just looked at purchase over purchase. But, I'd have to think some of the outbound activities, even last year, if you're tracking, I would think you're calling your database saying, hey, you need to refinance because rates are super low. But what I encourage everyone is when you start tracking it, then those stories of how much time that you're actually working, or maybe you've created this story of like, oh, I know my numbers are down, but if you don't know by how much, then you could be feeling defeated or overwhelmed, or like that 2022 goal is so much further out than what it may really be, because you're not looking at just the reality of the numbers. So you've got to know your numbers. And when you track it, you may feel more peace than what could be this made up fear or overwhelming feeling.
Yeah, I think you're so spot on. And I think that's, we talked about it a month ago when we talked about here we are at the mid-year, and it's the first time I've ever said, hey, this is the time where you can adjust your goal. Because I'm just not a big fan of ever giving up, right? I'm not a big fan of that at any point. And it is interesting because you mentioned, are you actually working a full day? And I'm not the one who says everyone needs to work 8 hours a day. Obviously you and I both have talked about it. We're wearing shirts that say it, is that most people are more productive in the morning. Right. One of the, I loved it so we interviewed Don Hobbs on Friday. Don used to work for Jim Rohn. He actually worked alongside of Tony Robbins as a market manager for Jim Rohn. And then he ran Jim's organization. He ran Success Magazine recently. But he's super influential. But he actually, one of the jobs he didn't really say on the interview, but he talked to us about beforehand, he actually worked for Gary Keller right after he wrote The One Thing and he's got a company called The One Thing, where it's a coaching company that's outside of Keller Williams that Gary also has. And when he hired Don to run that company, he said, well, what do you expect from me? Like, because Don's like, I'm an entrepreneur, I've never had a job. And he said, well, I just expect for you to work until noon every day. Basically said, hey, that's really all the energy you're going to have anyway. After that, you're probably going to be worthless. I don't know if that's the exact word he used, so, but that's kind of what he said. And so I think a lot of it is deciding what to do. So perfect example is today, right? I started working at 8. I made calls until 8:45. I jumped on our team call. And since I've been in California, I actually haven't really been working until after 9. But today, my wife wanted to go walking on the beach when the tide was out to pick up shells. So that's what I did. I actually made my calls, got 50% of my calls done, ironically, in 45 minutes. I made a commitment on one of these calls a few weeks back to shoot for 100 quality conversations in a week. So if I'm going to do 20 today, that means I got to talk to 10 people. Ironically, since then, I've only made 2 as I was prepping for this call and then reviewing numbers. But once I get done, I've got another hour scheduled to make calls and get my 20 done, because it's a standard I set for myself, right? I've made that commitment. So I don't necessarily think you could choose whether you're going to work 8 hours or not, but also I don't want to be a jerk, but don't fool yourself if you're not, right? If you're getting distracted and, doing other stuff. Like for me, I get distracted by the stock market some days, right? Play around in there, or I get distracted by just other things that can do it. But it's the whole idea of staying focused on it, and then really, making the plan. I do think, I'm a broken record when it comes to, if you know what the activities are that are required to get the result that you want, then you have a measurement, you have a way that you can figure out exactly what you need to do, what activities you need to increase in order to get the goal that you're after. I think that's where most people miss it. Most people are just like, well, maybe I'll work 30 more minutes. Well, the question is 30 more minutes doing what? And we just know it's outbound activity. And so let's kind of talk for a minute, Deborah. I mean, certainly from a social media perspective, one is, why don't you give us the social media audit piece? And then let's also talk about activities, because I know, there's some ideas both of us have about what people can be doing right now in this market to have more conversations, which will ultimately lead to more transactions.
Well, the biggest thing that I noticed on just for auditing my own client accounts in July, what they actually did a much better job of than usually any other month, ironically, is posting more personal posts that would give some kind of connection, which usually that's because they were traveling themselves or the kids were home off from summer. And so this is just a reminder to everybody that when you're creating that content calendar, or even if you're leveraging a service to do it for you, you need to make sure that you're interjecting what I call the offensive side of the strategy. So to use football terminology, there's the defensive side, which is solving the consistency, which is obviously number one. That's usually the biggest challenge for people, because they're kind of winging it. They know they need to post, and then they have every good intention, but then the action, there's no follow through. So the best defensive strategy is to make sure that you're showing up at least every day, and that it's valuable content based not only on connection and relationships, but also positioning you as the expert. So that's more of the defensive side that we help people with. And, obviously all the market research that we do and our Friday emails that go out, we really take that and say, hey, loan officer, instead of doing all that research and content consumption yourself, I package it every Friday and I spoon feed you so that Monday you have your action steps of what to do for the following week, so that you're more intentional with just current market data, beyond just, keeping current matters content. Not that that's bad content, but just making sure that you're keeping yourself relevant beyond what everybody else is posting. So the offensive side of the strategy, which is what a lot of clients did well over July, is making sure that you're still the face and that you're the human, and that you go live every once in a while, or you're posting those behind the scenes stories and showing other parts of you besides just a real estate agent or loan officer, because that again is how people then feel connected. And the more that you're like somebody else, and if there's common interest, whether it's the Cowboys or beer or the Cardinals or whatever, then they're going to be like, oh, I trust this person, I like this person because they're more like me. And so you can't be just one dimensional. And if you've been doing that in July, good job. Just keep it going. Don't let it stop just because summer is ending and school's about to start for kiddos, and you may be taking them to and from, but still be focus on human to human marketing, not just B2B or B2C, because at the end of the day, the most human brand wins, and people fall in love with you, even the imperfect you, because when you're imperfect, that gives them permission to be imperfect. So, and then always in part of your prospecting time, whether that's an hour in the morning, I would include social media in that. So take, 15, 20 minutes, go in, make sure you're wishing your friends happy birthdays. Also allow that to be an audit. So if there's people showing up on your birthday list that you haven't really kept in contact with, or you don't even know who they are. Like I was guilty when I moved to Houston, I friended every agent I knew. And now my feed is filled with people that I have no clue who they are. So that's a great audit system each day, but that you're being your referral sources and clients' biggest fan. It's not about them liking and commenting on your content. It's how do we double down and show that we're seeing them. People want to be uniquely seen. They don't want to feel like they just did one transaction with you and they never hear from you again. So if I could express anything to focus on, it's just literally being the imperfect human that you are and accepting yourself as that, so you can show up online and not allow perfectionism to get in the way of implementation and executing.
And you said 4 to 5 posts on your story a day.
Yes. Space them out. Always. Okay. Yeah. Make sure they're like an hour and a half apart. But, people think that always has to be you or it has to be business. It doesn't. Like you posted one playing a game that I had never even heard of. I know that's probably not shocking to you because I also had never played Monopoly. But again, what you posted was an engagement piece that I didn't know. So I commented, oh, is this anything like Clue? And that's what the goal is when you can create those connections that then lead to conversations that then can lead to more conversion, because you're just re-engaging in a social space where it's more appropriate. And some people get annoyed when you're texting or emailing because it's their time. And maybe they're like, I'm very protective of text messages where, if it's a family member, like that usually means urgent when I get a text message. If I'm getting, and I have clients that have put me on their texting list that's like, hey, have a great Labor Day. And I'm like, okay, I don't need a flyer of you on Labor Day texted to my phone. It just seems a little bit more intrusive versus the social space. It's a little bit more acceptable to, slide into the DMs or send a private message where you can ask a question and it's up to that person to respond when they have a free moment.
I love it. All right. So what about Instagram versus Facebook stories? Is it okay to put the exact same thing on both?
It is, because about 10% of your your current following is going to see that. The whole goal is to have new followers see your content so you can break down your insights to see, especially if you're doing reels, it's nice to see how many new followers are seeing your content. That doesn't mean that they're following you now, but they're seeing your content because of the reach. There's so much noise and there's so much content that when people overthink, should I be posting the same thing on all platforms? Yes, because you don't know which platform it's going to take off on. And if you have scheduling tools like our own, the same video that you post on Facebook as a reel, as Instagram as a reel, shared to a story on Google My Business, on TikTok, on YouTube Shorts, on LinkedIn, one of those, you have a higher chance of it going viral or seeing more people than if you only focused on one. And I have heard people say, well, I was told and coached to just focus on one platform and nail that platform. Problem is a couple of weeks ago, Instagram and Facebook, they were down. And Facebook owns Instagram. So God forbid, if something happened to that platform and they're down, you still want your other pillars of business to be active and consistent, and you're not just pigeonholed on one, area. Does that make sense?
Love that. Totally makes sense. And that's kind of my thinking. It just reminds me, I made to put on my to-do list to connect my Facebook and Instagram stories because for some reason they're not connected. So I can post to one to the other. So no, I love that. And so I just think that's really critical. And the reason that I wanted you to talk about that was because I feel like, one, it's coaching to me. Like, I gotta schedule that time in there, right? What gets scheduled gets done. And I'm a big believer in that. I did post a picture from the beach this morning. So, just saying, I did post one picture from hiking yesterday, but I could have posted more.
It's a fine line because you also want to be present in the moment. So there's nothing more annoying. Like I will go out with people and they're like constantly taking pictures and photos of everything. And you're like, can you just be present right now? So sometimes I bank my content and it's later grams. So I may not be, and this is just, food for thought for those listening. Like my sister is one where she doesn't want to ever post when she's on vacation during the week. She just feels like it looks bad, or, she doesn't want people to think that she's not available. So she'll be on vacation, but you won't see any of that in her stories. And she'll even post things that could look like she's in Plano, Texas, but she's not. She's on the beach. And that's because we'll batch content, or we'll, if there's an experience we enjoy, then maybe we'll capture some of those and then we'll share it later on for later gram moments, so that you are still accessible for the perception of your clients who may be like, oh, well, they just never work. They're just on vacation all the time, spending all this money that I'm refinancing or buying,
that I'm
you never
making
know
them.
what. Yeah. So, but I will say you need to, this is something I still struggle with, and I have to set a timer. So this is my cheat. When you're on social in the mornings, you can go down a dark rabbit hole of being distracted, especially TikTok. That is my weakness, because I just start laughing.
Exactly. I don't go to TikTok. See?
Oh, it's just,
I better.
there's moments. Yeah, I just get it's like this dark hole. So I have to set a timer. So I will set a timer. I do 15 minutes in the morning. And as soon as it goes off, then I'm done. I put it away. I turn my phone so I don't even see notifications.
That's pretty smart. My wife was down the hole of Instagram yesterday, and she follows Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh,
and
yes.
Then she said we hiked up to what the heck, Griffith Park yesterday. It's the Griffith Park Observatory, and it's a pretty steep climb. And she says, hey, remember that lady we passed with a hat? So right when we crossed the street, we passed this lady, and she had a hat that kind of covered her neck. It was kind of unique hat that she had. And I'm like, oh, I remember her. We said good morning, and we walked by, and she said good morning back. And then my wife was like, she's like, look, here she is. It's Michelle Yao. I don't know how you pronounce her last name.
Really?
Yeoh. But she was in the picture with Jamie Lee Curtis because she was the co-star of Everything Everywhere, which was a movie that we watched. And I'm like, look at that was my brush with fame in California. But I didn't she was wearing a mask at that time, or maybe, I don't even know if she was, whatever. She was just hiking up the hill. We wouldn't have bothered her anyway. But my wife would have recognized her had we actually slowed down. But it was very, that was my brush with fame. All right, so back to reality.
Yeah.
Since we only have a couple minutes left. So I like the social media action plans, and let's just talk about action plans for real estate agents and loan officers to make more calls. Because in the end, I think that's what it boils down to. If you're frustrated with where your business is, even if you don't do the things that we said to do and actually do the review of before and make an action plan, is the bottom line is, you need to do more activities most likely. And so who are you going to call? And really in the end, you can divide it into people that you know, and you can divide it into people that you don't know. So if you use HomeBot, super easy. Dive in there, look at who recently has looked at their HomeBot, whether you're a real estate agent or a client, your loan officer, call them, say, awesome, hey, I just want to check in to see how you're liking the monthly digest that I'm sending you, right? Quick, easy question to ask them. And they might be like, whatever. You can also log in there and see who never looked at their monthly digest. Say, hey, I've been sending you this thing. I know you're not looking at it, and get feedback from them. And maybe it's in their spam, and I'll pull it into their regular inbox so that the regular inbox will remember that it's not spam going forward. Again, real estate agents offer a CMA, right? Or don't offer a CMA to say, gosh, your neighbor's done so well. Congratulations on timing your purchase, right? But really, they do want to hear from you on a review basis. Hey, I'm going to start calling you quarterly. I'll start calling you, semi-annually, whatever you're going to do, right? More is better, to check in and see how you're doing, right? Loan officer, same thing, annual mortgage review, right? Hey, congrats again on having your, 2.75% mortgage. Just wanted to let you know I'm still watching it, even though I don't think there's any refinance. How's everything going? Oh, good, awesome. Hey, do you mind if I ask, how's your debt outside of your mortgage, right? Consumer debt's at an all-time high. We talked earlier about people wanting to back refinances out of their numbers, but what I'm still seeing is that mortgage loan applications last week were, I forgot if the number was 30% or 40%, but either way, it was a really big number. It was over 30% for sure that of applications that are refinance applications. So think about this, right? There's still a lot of people out there refinancing. I can tell you for our team, it's down to about 15% right now, but that's kind of a normal market anyway. I mean, even in a normal, rate decline market, rate increase market, there's going to be about 15% of people still potentially refinancing to get a pool, pay off debt, send a kid to college, all those things that we see. And so I think really that's the number one area that I would focus is what do you have who do you have that you can call, and what tools do you have that might give that clue? So I started with HomeBot because that's an easy one that I know a lot of you all have. If you don't have it, reach out. I'm happy to share with you what my thoughts are on it and give you a discount code for it. And then I would be looking at who are the new people I want to connect with, right? So, as a real estate agent, that's going to be your farm. As a loan officer, that's going to be the real estate agents that you want to work with. And I would just be coming up with a strategy for that, which Deborah and I will talk about in a future call.
Sounds good.
All right, what are your last words you want to put a bow on this?
Do what?
Yep, go for it. That's your last. What do you want to say as your last word? So give it to me.
I think a proactive way for agents to be able to do a CMA a day, and even a loan officer for a TCA, is news hacking the fact that whether you are going off the traditional definition of a recession or not, but I don't know, because I haven't gone too far into the analytics on employment with if people lose their job, But one proactive safety net could be if you're sitting on a bunch of equity and you're in a position that could be at risk as we are heading in a recession or in a recession, you're going to want to refinance and take cash out before you lose that job, because then you have challenges with qualifying to be able to pull that equity out. So that could be, I don't know how you would package that or word it a little bit, but just, recession's coming, consumer debt is high. I know trading up that 2% or 3% interest rate may be painful, but what's more painful is if you're 90 days without a job and now you need to bleed into something and you have nothing in savings and nothing's liquid, and now you can't refinance and pull equity out because you don't have income.
I love that. All right, so we're over our 30 minutes, but I'll tell one other story, and it's just kind of food for thought. One of the things I've heard a lot of loan officers say is that they're getting lots of requests from people for home equity lines of credit. And so I even had a friend call me last week and he said, hey, there's a leak in my roof. I need a new roof. I'm going to get a line of credit. In my mind, I was thinking to myself, well, what happened to your savings? He normally has a lot of savings, but it's a friend call. It wasn't a friend, a loan officer call, it was a friend call. And it's a small amount, but there's a lot of loan officers have been telling me they got clients who are getting, $100,000, $200,000 lines of credit to consolidate debt and do other things. And I heard Jeremy Forsey say on a call something that resonated with me is he said, well, I'm telling my clients that, yeah, I can see why you might want to do that because you've got a 3% mortgage, but eventually rates are going to come down. And here's what it's going to look like with this big $200,000 line of credit at 7.5%, even though it's interest only. And he said, because the client's philosophy is that they're going to refinance the HELOC and the first mortgage back together when rates are lower. And Jeremy said, yeah, but when you do that later, that's going to be a cash out refinance. You're going to get a higher rate. What I would do instead, again, if it's a big enough second, what I would do instead is I would do a cash out refinance now. Look at the payments. You're going to have to do a TCA to compare what the payment would be on their current mortgage plus the HELOC versus this new mortgage. Hey, the payments are pretty comparable. And then from here, then I'll be watching out for an opportunity to refinance you later when rates come down. And so just personally, it was funny. I was going to get a line of credit on one of my rental properties. I thought, you know what, let me look at it, the numbers. And I looked at it and thought, oh my gosh, Fed's going to keep raising rates. They're going to raise them through the end of the year. Yeah, they'll come down next year. But I realized that I was much better off getting rid of the lower mortgage rate on the rental property, doing the cash out refi now. And then later on, I will go ahead and refinance myself when rates drop in the future.
Dang, can you send me that TCA link, or did Jeremy post it? That'd be a great one. Send out.
I will find it. I will see if I can find that. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So that's the other idea. As always, Deborah and I have fun doing this. As always, our 30 minutes is typically 30 to 40 minutes. And remember, these Mondays are about you. So if you have a suggestion or you have someone who might want to be a guest, it was fun to have Michelle Castle pop on there. I've got a couple of future guests that I'm working on. But you know what? For me, I just enjoy getting on here with you, Deborah, and having time to rattle off what's on our minds. And, I guess the good news is people show up here and watch it live and watch it on video. So if you are watching on video, because Deborah tells me I should tell you this, make sure you hit that subscribe button up there. Give us a like. We would love that. And all right, what else you want to say, Deborah?
I posted in your Facebook group, so make sure you guys are also in the Facebook group, Win by Noon Mastermind, how my current setup. So if you wanted to see some behind the scenes, my laptop is literally being held up by a paint can. So y'all check that out in the Facebook group and know that done is better than perfect. So here we are.
That's it. If mine is on I'm actually in the bedroom at the rental that we're at. So it's actually up on pillows. So if I did this, it's wobbly. But my normal spot that I do for our Friday calls is outside. The landscape guy's out there right now blowing it, so I can't be out there. But it's on a cooler on a table. So that's, I like that. I like that a lot. So
yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, everyone, I hope that's helpful. I hope that'll give you some ideas of what to look at from July and or before, and how to take some action going into August. As always, we're grateful for you, for your time. And Deborah, thank you again for being part of what we do here at Win by Noon. We will see you all next week. Thanks again.
All right. Take care.
All right. Fist bump. I like that.